Hi guys, this is the False Prince part 11. Stay tuned, there will be a part 12, and I don't know how long this is gonna take. It's about as long as chapter 9 was, so here we go. Matt was waiting alone on the other side of the doors. Obviously he knew that what would be discussed in there, and he had chased the other servants away. I stopped when I saw him, cringing a bit as I waited for him to clunk me over the head or commit some other act to force me back into Connor's sitting room. There was no cowardice in my nervousness. His hits came without mercy, but he only nodded at me. "You clean up well for an orphan." I had help. "Where were you going?" I scratched an itch on my face. Didn't really think that through yet. Somewhere I can be alone. But apparently had no inclinations to leave me alone. He put an arm on my shoulder and steered me down the hallway. "Come with me." We walked outside to a courtyard in the rear of Farthenwood, lining with torches that flickered in the breeze. On one wall were several swords. Each was different. One had a longer blade, another was thinner, another was jagged on one side. The things varied. From sword with a simple metal grip to ones wrapped in leather or crowned in jewels. One might appeal to a lifelong warrior, another a mercenary. I suspected that one of these was supposed to appeal to a prince. "Choose one," I said. He said, "How do I know the one that's right for me?" "It's the one that calls to you," Ma said. I reached for the one with a medium-sized blade with a wide fuller groove down the length. The hilt was wrapped in dark brown leather, and a circle of deep red rubies was set into the pommel. Almost as soon as I grabbed it, the sword fell from my grasp and landed on the ground. Mark darted forward and retrieved it, like I committed some sort of sin by dropping the sword. "This is obviously too heavy for you," said he. He said, "Choose another one." "It was heavier than it looked, but it's fine now," I said, lifting it with both hands. "I chose it because it called to me." "Why?" I smiled. "It has rubies on it. I could sell these for a lot of money. Try it, and I'll use this same sword to run you through as a punishment." "Have you ever held a sword before?" "Sure. I'd held one once. Sure, I'd once held the sword of Archduke of Montegris after sneaking into a room where he was staying. I'd taken it just to admire it, of course, while he was asleep one night, but I hadn't held it for long before I was caught. My punishment was thorough, but it had been worth it just for a few minutes of holding a sword as fine as his. "What's returning with the sword?" Ma asked. "I suspect not enough to make a fair match between you and me." Ma smiled. "I heard what Connor said to you in the dining room. Despite what he describes as your limitations, you do have a chance to take the role of the prince. But you must learn and train and give yourself every advantage you can. Now raise your sword." He demonstrated holding his sword upright, nearly parallel to his body and tilted outward. "Like this. This is first position." I followed him and moved my sword as he did. "Like this." "Like this?" "Get used to the feel of it in your hand. Swing it back and forth. Learn to control it, to balance it." I obeyed. Despite its weight, I liked the feel of the sword. I liked me with the sword in my hand. It stirred up memories of how I used to be, before the day-to-day survival that comes with living in the orphanage. Still in the first position, Mott said this was where you begin any basic attack. So I should avoid it then. I said. Mott raised an eyebrow. "Why is that?" "If that's basic, then it's the first move everyone learns, which means everyone knows how to defend against that one." Mott shook his head. "It doesn't work that way. Sword fighting isn't a chess game where you make one move and so does your opponent." I said, "Obviously." Mott pulled the sword off the wall, comparable to mine in length. "Let's test you then, see how far you do as a beginner. Should I use a wooden sword too?" That made Mott smile. "Even with a wooden sword, I can still do more damage to you than you'll do with me with that real one." As soon as he finished speaking, he cut a line through the air past my sword and hit me in the shoulder. "Did you at least try to stop me?" he said. I made a face and thrust my sword at him, but he parried it. "Not bad," he said, "but be bolder. Prince Jaron was known for that." Sounds like he's dead, so whatever his boldness was with that sword, it obviously didn't save him. "Nobody could have survived so many pirates," Ma said. "Nobody on the ship did survive." "And they probably all had swords," I said, swiping at empty air when Mott took a step backward. "So training me with one is useless?" "Relax your body," Mott said. "You're too tense." "Why me?" I asked, lowering my sword. "Why am I here?" "Why shouldn't you be? Tobias is smarter than me, and Roden is stronger. Apparently I have only slight resemblance to what he feels the prince would look like today." Mott lowered his sword as well. Tobias may be more educated than you, but I have no doubt you're clever. Rodin is stronger, but a strong heart will always overcome a strong body. He smiled. As for the physical resemblance, it would help if you cut your hair and sit up straighter. I couldn't see your face half the time you were speaking. Now raise your sword. Your problem is that you're trying to hit my sword. Hit me. I'd hurt you. This is a sword fight, Sage. That's the idea. I raised my sword and lunged him. He stepped toward me and slid the sword up the inside of my blade, then rotated and pushed it down. My sword fell out of my hand and clattered into the ground. Pick it up, Maud said. After glaring at him for a moment, I picked it up, but I held it down, making it clear I was finished with this lesson. He ran to me. I had you figured wrong. I thought you'd be more of a fighter. Fighting for what? The privilege to getting myself killed one day like Egbert's family? Even if I did what Connor wants, I'd never feel like a prince. I'd only be playing the part nothing more than an actor for the rest of my life. And what are you now? Mott lowered his own sword. You put on a facade of toughness, but I've seen you look frightened. You pretend to care for nobody, but I didn't miss your reaction when Latimer fell. And you pretended that you could run from your family in Avinia without looking back. But I hear the tone in your voice when you speak to them. I don't think you hate everyone half as much as you claim to. You're an actor now, Sage. All Connor wants is for you to act on behalf of Carthia rather than for yourself. Mott had hit closer to the truth than he'd realized. I didn't want to think about my fears or Latimer, or especially about my family. I handed him the sword and said, thanks for the lesson, but I'll never be the prince. Interesting you chose that sword then, Mott said. It's a replica of the one Prince Jaron once owned. If Connor can look at you and see a prince, then it's about time you did the same. So yeah, that was chapter 11, and please look for The False Prince audiobook part 12, because it will definitely be there. It's going to be there tonight, because I know I was going to finish 11 because it was a really short chapter, and so it'll be there, and see ya.